Not at all. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, January 22nd Finance and Budget Committee special meeting. Can I have a roll call, please? Ms. Palmer, thanks.
Mayor Gilman,
Here?
Mayor Pro Tem Meng,
Here.
City Treasurer Olson,
Here.
Committee Member Creasy,
Here.
and Committee Member Roth.
Here.
Thank you. And would you please join me in the pledge? Thank you. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Can I have an approval of the agenda or any potential changes, please?
Move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. Any objections? Wonderful. Okay, great. Any public communications that we've received, either online or in person?
No,
There's
there's nobody on Zoom. I don't have any cards.
nobody on Zoom. Okay, sounds good to me.
Have you ever had that happen?
It's becoming increasingly more popular to not be on Zoom, hopefully because everything's going okay.
Yeah.
But whatever, I'll take it how it goes. So let's go to the consent calendar. Anybody want to pull anything out of the consent calendar? Basically, our minutes.
Who could approve the minutes from 23 when
True that,
everybody
none of
was
us were.
on the board?
That's correct.
Right. By function of the body, you're able to do so. It's kind of a similar thing as if you weren't at a meeting, but you can still vote on the minutes.
Mhm.
It's not a best practice, and so
Of course.
it's certainly our goal moving forward to make sure we're current each meeting, do the minutes, so. And in the last meeting, with the understanding that we did not live stream, it was not, yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're establishing a new habit now of live streaming and having the minutes as an established body. So going
Yes.
forward, much more accountability. Well, I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Any objections? Wonderful. Okay, so let's move to the discussion. The fiscal year 2024-2025 unaudited actuals.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to turn things over to Ms. Cho.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Finance and Budget Committee. I will present an overview of the fiscal year 2020,
Is your microphone on? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
fiscal year 2024-25 unaudited actuals.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just want to emphasize that this is for the period July 1st, 2024, ending June 30th, 2025. These are unaudited numbers. We will have our field work for our auditors beginning February 16th. So these numbers may change as a result of that audit, but these are the numbers as of right now.
Okay.
So if we look at attachment A, this focuses on the general fund revenues. So there's a comparison of what was budgeted. The next column is the unaudited actuals and the variance between the budgeted number and the revenues received. So in the variance column, if it's a positive number, that means we came over what was originally budgeted for the year. So the green that's highlighted, the 17.4 million, is what we had received for the fiscal year 24-25. So that's about 1 million over what was originally anticipated in the budget. I will note some of the other general fund revenue and transfers includes some one-time grant funding. So for example, we received funding for street maintenance work from a coronavirus relief supplemental appropriation, as well as funding from SB 125, which was used to purchase the trolleys in that fiscal year. So those are, for example, revenues that we won't see recurring in the future.
May I ask a question? So that 828,000 positive variance in the other general fund revenue and transfer, that's what you were referring to with those two grant examples, is that right?
Yeah, there are other factors included, like for example, in 24-25, interest was budgeted at 160,000, but actuals came in above 500. So for example, that variance in what was originally budgeted and what we received plays into that 828,000.
Okay. So we've got interest plus those 2 grants as the big variance drivers, you think, is that right?
Yeah, and there were other increases such as rec classes and programs. They brought in a little bit more revenue that was originally budgeted, but as you'll see in another slide, also their expenses will be over what was originally budgeted because those usually go hand in hand. More costs for programs are usually offset somewhat with the revenues coming in for those programs as well.
And the 2 grant favorable items that you mentioned, one was for purchase of trolleys. What was the other one? Was it street maintenance or?
Yes, it was from the Coronavirus Response Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. The city received about $300,000 that was to cover street maintenance operations, so that covered some of the salaries in public works as well as supplies and materials during that time.
Okay, thank you. And just one comment, your property tax includes the motor vehicle in lieu item as well, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Just curious, so on the TOT, that 335, what's the general thinking on that? Why that went up over the budget? I mean, is that the beginning of El Roblar? No, it's not. It's because that's after that. So how would you account for that? Just curious. I'm eager to see it because if we would underestimate this year going forward, that's also a positive indicator. Yeah.
I'll jump in. I think
Yeah.
what we're seeing, our major driver in TOT is, of course, the Ojai Valley Inn, and what was once an ancillary or accessory market for them, which is conferences and corporate meetings, is now a primary for them.
Right.
They brought on the farmhouse building, and it's really taken off to the degree that if you are a corporation and you want to book that, or a trade group or whatever, it's booked out a year plus in advance. And so that's a big driver that we're seeing because we get a benefit from that.
I see that. Thank you.
Can I just ask a general question? Because I always try to take the loose ends and try to see where it shows up somewhere else. So this variance number, this 1.1 million, is that gonna show up somewhere else in our reserves, in our unassigned reserves, I'm just curious where that's gonna show up.
Yeah, so that will impact the ending fund balance. So the ending fund balance will take into account the total revenues that are coming in the general fund as well as going out. So if we are receiving more in revenues, then yes, that ending balance number will go up, but there's also another factor with the expenditure side as well.
And the expenditure side is also under.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's exactly what you all hope for in your own life.
And one of the things I had mentioned earlier is we have a general fund reserve policy, and our reserve policy says 100%. And I had questioned what that 100% of the prior year's expenditures were. And at the same time, I asked a question, what happens with the excess reserves above and beyond the 100%? And I'm just curious if this is one of those numbers that we should see later on or something, because that's a good sized reserve.
That's right.
An excess of revenue
That's correct.
to carry forward. So I'm just mentioning that.
Just to answer that, when you, like, for example, if you look at the expenses that you're talking about on the following page, and you see the 17,866 and then the 16,192,
Yeah.
and you see there's a positive variance as well. When we're debating things in the council about something to fund, we're looking at that excess of a 100% reserve as some, it gives us that kind of breathing room to think about a project like that without a big impact. So that's where it seems to me you would see things that would turn into a budget change, like the increase in the arts grants or the help of Ojai, piece like that. Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Mhm.
we'll talk about
Okay.
that later.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Excuse me, one other very minor point. When I looked back to the budget book and tried to tie your budgeted revenues to the budget book,
it looked like you were over by a small amount in this number versus what's in the budget book. And the small amount that it was over is exactly equal to the fines and forfeitures number. And I don't know whether that's just a bizarre coincidence or whether you actually double counted fines and forfeitures. But I would call that out to you just for, completeness sake.
Yes, we'll take another look at that. I do want to note that in the budget, on the revenue side, there is a contra account that is set up. So for example, our admin fees with HDL related to TOT, it'll show on the budget as a positive number, as if it's a revenue coming in. However, that's a contra account, so that's where we charge the admin fees, so it's actually a reduction. But it is odd that it's exactly that amount, so we will double check that number.
Great, thank you.
The next attachment, attachment B, is a review of the general fund expenditures for 24-25. Similar format where we have budgeted amounts, unaudited actuals, and the variance. And in the variance, if it's a positive number, that indicates that we came under what was originally budgeted. Some of the major variances throughout the department are related to salaries and benefits and some vacancies. Also, generally when we're budgeting for salaries and benefits, there's assumptions that we make in that budget. For example, the range, insurance, if they're a PEPRA Classic member. So those assumptions may not actually be the candidate who ends up filling that role. So most of the variances are due to some of the vacancies in the year and also the assumptions that are made. I will also call out, sorry, did you have a question? No. Hopefully I'll answer them. I will call out the transportation at $269,000. I know Mr. Creasy had asked a question about that. That is also related to the purchase of the trolleys. So when the grant funding came in, the city booked that under general fund. However, that was paid out of one of the transportation funds. Mm-hmm. So since the money came into the general fund will transfer that expense out to the fund that originally took in the cost. So the revenues that I mentioned for that trolley purchase is offset by this transfer.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
And another variance, if we see by budgeted, is the police department. It does look like it was, the variance is $668,000, though I will just note that the actuals for the prior year was $3.36 million, so it is in line with what was actually spent in the current year. I'm sorry, in 24-25. Are there any questions on the expenditure page?
Just to clarify, to make sure I understand, so of the round numbers, 800,000 other revenue favorability, roughly 500 of that was interest, and 300, speaking very big round numbers, was the trolley grant, is that right? And the trolley grant shows up as an expense in the general fund because in essence you're transferring that out to buy the trolley. Is that layman description close to right?
Yes, I will just say that $800,000 variance is an accumulation throughout the whole fund. So for example, I will say trying to think of, sorry, we're talking about revenues.
Right.
Yes, so it is an accumulation of mostly interest. Mm-hmm. There's also a GASB entry which deals with fair market value. So it's not an actual cash transaction, but it reflects the fair market value at June 30th, which we would have to enter into our financials, and the grant receives. I will say if we go line by line, there will be some under, some over that offset. But generally, overall speaking, those are the major contributors.
And I'm just trying to sort of eliminate my concern about the transportation number. So there is not a department called transportation. This was just a line item that was created to accommodate the single event of getting this money to buy the trolley. On the expense side, yeah. Okay, because I was kind of worried that this expense really lived in somebody else's P and L, and for some unknown reason, you pulled it out and put it on a special line item. But it sounds now like that I was overly suspicious relative to how you described it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a transfer, so it offsets in the general fund. So it's not an extra cost somewhere else that
Right,
the
it's
general
just
fund
not
is.
a net plus or minus to the general fund bottom line.
Yes.
Got it, thank you.
Okay.
So the next attachment, attachment C, is a summary of the fund balance. So if we're looking at the chart, it starts with 23-24 audited numbers. Beginning balance is 17.9 million. Change in fund balance for that year is 3.8, resulting in an ending balance of 21.7 million. So 24-25 should start with 21.7 million. However, in 24-25, we broke out a new fund for the public arts. So that 134 reduction is to account for the transfer of the beginning fund balance to the newly created fund. So with that, 21.6 million beginning fund balance with a change in 1.2 million, resulting in an ending balance of 22.8 million. And if we're looking at the reserve policy, we're taking 100% of prior year's expenditures at the 13 million, leaving approximately 9.8 million unallocated. And for 25-26, with the same formatting, beginning balance 22.8, change in balance of negative million, ending balance 21.8, taking on 100% expenditures of prior year 16.2 million, ending in a 5.6 million unallocated. I will just note that this ending fund balance is not necessarily all liquid. General fund absorbs the timing difference of grant receipts, for example, and so that's not all cash. There's some receivable balances in there as well.
So I see exactly what you're saying. So when I see the 100% reserve, let's say for 24-25 unaudited, that 13,040 is directly reflecting the audited expenditures for the prior year. I get that. So then when we're working with our 100% reserve number, we're always going to refer back to not the budget, but the actuals for the prior year once we know that. So that's going to be our number. So even until we know that number, our 100% reserve is roughly known, but not exactly known. Okay, that's interesting to know.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
for clarifying that.
Well, what's interesting though is because you would say, if you look at the budgeted, let's say, budgeted expenditures for the year, and then you end up coming in under that on the expenditures, you essentially have more potential above the 100% reserve.
Right.
That's an interesting way of thinking about it. Okay, thank you for that.
And can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Because I want to make sure that I understand the makeup of the reserve, because I think that's really important. And I was looking at the CAFR, page 80. I hate to switch gears on you, but this is where it talks about net position of fund balance. And we go through those categories. that
Microphone, please.
With fund balance.
Is your microphone on? Make sure it's on, yeah.
I think it is. Is it on?
Now it is.
Oh, now it is, okay. And all I was trying to do is, from what I understand, the fund balance takes out the non-spendable from the successor agencies, and then all of that restricted revenues that are for a specific purpose, and you go through and say community development, capital improvements, and you see there's 6.6 million in capital improvements for Measure C. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around what those committed reserves are for. They could be projects that were started, they had a contract to deliver some goods. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, page 80.
Yeah, I don't
Oh, okay, you don't have the CAFR, okay.
And also, just if
I'm
I
sorry.
could, because the public doesn't have what you're looking at either, I
I
think this
know.
is an item that we'll probably have to come back and answer for you
Okay,
later,
all
because if anyone is watching this or they don't have the reference, and it wasn't posted as part of the agenda, we can't, does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. I was just trying to make sure that when we
Understand.
look
I
at
think
fund
this is
balance,
just
we
a
know there's
offline-
certain parts that are restricted. It's not just open-ended.
Sure, but this is just a conversation that we'll have to have with you afterwards, or as a future item, just because the public can't participate.
Oh, I see.
That'd be a great conversation to have in the future, though. I totally
Okay.
would love to have that.
Because I just want to better understand and make clear, it's not just a free-for-all. There's things set aside for
One
committed
thing,
funds.
For sure.
one thing I would like to add on that issue, I think Mr. Olson actually asked this question in one of our prior meetings about how much of the general fund reserve is committed or earmarked for certain things versus others. And the answer we got after going through it a little bit was the vast majority of the general fund reserve is uncommitted. It is there to be used as a buffer or however the city council decides to use it. However, the rest of the reserve funds are largely committed one way or another. And so, Renee, for your thinking in general, and the way I think about it, reserve funds and general fund, by and large, play money. Everything else, it's in the rent bucket or the replacement bucket or who knows what, but it's not really touchable.
But for a future agenda item, I would say we would want to just simply look at the amount of the reserve, does it make sense? And look at what other cities do, just as some comparison. Not for today.
Not for today. I was just trying to bring it up
Yeah,
and have it be able to understand and talk about what that amount is.
And I think,
fair enough.
Mayor, what I infer from that is what we've talked about before, to have a robust review of the reserve policy associated with the general fund reserve, because
Yeah.
we know how we got to 50, then we knew how we got to 100, but we're still waiting for that scientific analysis.
Understood. That's correct. That's my interest.
Okay,
Super.
thank you.
Yeah.
That concludes my presentation for the first item. If there's any other questions.
Did you, sorry, Ms. Cho, did you want to, you've also broken out down below, and maybe we touched on this, I didn't hear, but you want to talk about the Measure C fund balance?
Right. Thank you, please.
If you don't mind.
No, sorry. Yes, so we have the Measure C fund balance on the bottom of the attachment C. It's broken down in the same format as we just reviewed. So for example, I will start at the top, 23-24 audited beginning balance was 6.7 million. The change in fund balance for that year, 660,000, resulting in an ending balance of 7.4. That same 7.4 is the beginning balance for 24-25. And the change in balance is negative 2.2 million, reducing the fund balance to 5.1. With the budgeted numbers for the current 25-26 year, we are seeing a reduction in that ending balance to about 1.8.
And if I could jump in, this is not accidental, this is very deliberate, because what this council has said is that the voters approved this additional TOT increase, and they were very specific on what they wanted it to be used for. And what they didn't say is, keep that money in the bank. They said infrastructure improvement, fire hardening, climate resiliency. There was 4 or 5 things that they mentioned that they wanted to see done. And so this council has, for the past couple of years, been investing in those areas and therefore spending down the balance. Ultimately, we will probably, if this type of leadership continues, you would expect a fairly low ending balance in Measure C, simply because the council is giving direction to spend that on the town improvements as the voters approved at the ballot.
Can I just to add one little piece, because I do notice that there tends to be a habit, not among this group, where the one line from the actual measure says that the fund capital improvement and maintenance projects, including street paving, fire mitigation, code enforcement, climate change mitigation, until voters decide otherwise. What I notice people tend to do is pick the one that is most important for them to say that's what Measure C is supposed to be. And it seems to me that when the measure came out, it's deliberately broad
So,
to look at needs. Just,
since you brought it up, Mayor,
Yes,
and we've
go
talked about this before, but I would also recommend this committee at a future meeting discuss, a proposed Measure C policy to bring to the city council, because there's no apportionment
yes.
within the voters' language, and so that's fine if the council wants that, to have that freedom, fine, but it doesn't really call for, so for instance, we're just now diving into proactive code enforcement.
That's right.
Well, that was approved years ago, and there really hasn't been much of a needle move until this council said, hey, we want to start doing that.
You're suggesting this, I would further suggest that if we could come up with percentages that seemed reasonable, at least as ballparks, and that we would then assign a category for that Measure C spending to say, oh yeah, we're apportioning it these kinds of ways. Obviously, everything doesn't cost the same, but it would be interesting to know that we're spending it in those
Yeah,
ways.
and we, of course, would want to do that in concert with the city attorney's office, because this is approved by the voters. We want to make sure that, okay, is that consistent with what the intent probably was? I know that goes without saying, but.
Could I just add, I would definitely really appreciate that. I remember looking for discussions about Measure C funds in previous city council meetings. And I remember a meeting where there was a discussion about $1 million appropriation for fire safety, or whatever
We
the
did do
language
that.
is.
Yep,
And I just want to be clear that you can't really appropriate $1 million. I don't know how that would work in this environment with Measure C funds. So I just am wanting to know that, or bring that up, as I think that's just an example of, I think we need to have that defined a little bit about how much, where. We always know that you're going to spend the money where you need it to go, no matter what, but it's nice to have a target.
Just to respond, that dollar amount is correct, and the intention, Mr. Harvey, tell me if you disagree, was to say, this is an amount of money of which we think this is a high priority, something along these lines we will be spending. So it was not apportioned to any particular vendor or project, right, as you know. So at least for me, it gave a kind of a ballpark simply to say, oh, this is what we're thinking about in terms of prioritizing
Yeah.
or what we're up to, which is, I hear you saying that too. So we're in the midst of using those funds, right? But there's room there to spend more, so it's the right kind of spend is what you're asking.
Yeah, I would agree with what the mayor's saying, but this all begs the further question that we probably really need to get serious about developing a policy and have it embedded in public and
Thank you.
establish that, so.
Love
I
that too.
appreciate you bringing that up.
Any questions about this first item? It's very nice to see this and the numbers this way, and thanks for the clarity.
Of course.
Anything else on this? Let's move on. So item number 2, fiscal year 2025-26 mid-year budget adjustments.
Sorry, Ms. Cho, please proceed. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I'm sorry. So the next presentation will be on the mid-year review of the current fiscal year 25-26. Again, I will go through a similar format. So if we look at attachment A, is a review of the general fund revenues. So again, first column is what was budgeted for. Second column is what we have received as of January 25th, and the variance. I just want to also note that the year-to-date amount seems a little bit low, but that's because of the timing of the allocation of the major revenue sources that we get in. So there's a lag. So not to worry, that's not what we received for half the year. It's just the timing of receipt of allocations.
I have one question about that. So a budget that I managed in the past, which was nothing like this or even this scale, but I would have similar things where I would say, over the course of a year, I would have an amount that I could spend, but it was maybe front-loaded or back-loaded. So when people looked in July and they say, you have 70% left or you only have 30% left, they would get nervous, and I would say, my data over the years would show at this point I should be 70%. So I don't know if that's something that could come up at any point in the future where we said, we've done some kind of forecasting by looking at past years to know that if you said, oh, by this time of year, if we're at 30%, we know that we're on track or we know we're behind? Would be interesting to know.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
come with that information.
Only if you think that's useful.
I think, Mayor, what you're alluding to is something that we've talked about before, and that is the need for a more frequent budget versus actual analysis. If I had my druthers, we would have a quarterly close, soft close, not hard close, where we said last quarter, this was the revenue, this was the expense. You would compare it to last year's numbers, so the timing issues that you described, front-loading, back-loading, and so on, to the extent they're consistent year over year, which for revenues they definitely are, you would see, and as I look at this number here, I see TOT year-to-date, pretty much half of the budget. So feels, I think TOT gets remitted on a monthly basis, so that one really doesn't have lumpiness. It has seasonality, but not lumpiness of receipt. Sales tax, obviously, is pretty lumpy. Not that it's lumpy when it gets remitted at the point of sale, but lumpy when it gets remitted to the city. Property tax also has some lumpiness in it. But if you had a quarterly process that we have described in the past, it would go a long way to improve our ability to manage in a nimble fashion, as well as our ability to not be nervous about, gee whiz, what's it gonna look like when the whole year finally wraps up. So I think that's an objective that really has to be near the top of the list of your very long list of financial process improvements.
Well, and I just would add, and that is a good suggestion, we have a future agenda item point at the end of the meeting, and that would be a good suggestion for this committee to recommend. I've been in other cities where they've done that type of reporting on a monthly basis, and candidly, that was not very helpful because,
Too much.
but quarterly is probably, yeah, that's, then you're taking the mid-year and you're moving it, just a little more in depth, and I think that's worthwhile.
But even on a chart like what we're looking at right now, when the public looks at it and they say, well, if we're not at mid-year or something like that, as you say, lumpiness is the word that Mr. Creasy used, the public would understand at this point in time we should be at 30%. It adds a lot of confidence if you do a quick scan.
Yeah, we can implement that going forward. Also, we do contract with HDL, who specialize in forecasting these revenue sources. So they do give a breakdown of where we should estimate to be receiving.
Right.
And so we currently are on track on that schedule.
No, I heard you say that, absolutely. It would just be that it would come out in the report. And that's really nice to know, that they're reporting out on that. Makes everybody happy, right? That's great.
So if we move on to attachment B, this focuses on the general fund expenditures. This one has 24-25 unaudited actuals, and then current year budget numbers, year-to-date, and the variance. I will say in the year-to-date, we roughly paid through December, so there is also a little bit of a timing difference there. And again, the variance here, if it's positive, we are under where we had budgeted for. If we look at the bottom line of the variance, it's about 50% of the total budget, so roughly about half the year is where we're at. I'll pause if there's any specific questions on this page, but it does break it down by the general fund departments.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make a note on, back on the expenditure, the revenue side. If we go back to the revenue side and look at these two charts and compare them, I appreciate you having those charts because you can quickly see TOT is up to 47%, whereas in the prior year it was 40%. And that's a significant jump. And also, so it's nice to have these charts in here, and I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate that shows, it's easier to remember when you can see that. And also, the other general fund revenues and transfers are significantly lower, by half as much, 12%, and in previous years it was 22%. So those are things that I notice those differences, and I'm trying to understand and explain why, but I don't have to know. I'm just,
Well, one explanation is we're only halfway through the current budget year, so that number will certainly change
yeah,
between the two numbers, right? One's completed and one's mid-year.
yeah,
That in fact is likely going to be the major reason because, for
Yeah.
example, interest favorability last year, round numbers $500,000. You're gonna have round numbers north of that this year. But that's not yet in your mid-year number.
right.
TOT at 40% year-end last year, 44 now, just recognizes the fact that it gets received on a more regular basis where other things don't.
Right.
So those differences in percentages are really just, think of them as random numbers. You don't need to worry
It
about them.
just gives me more confidence
For
that
sure.
you know that your numbers are coming in. You're getting, the economy's good, people are paying for things in
Yeah.
our city, which is wonderful. to
Well,
know.
this is, and tell me if I heard you correctly, this is 4 months worth of data, essentially speaking, right?
Yeah,
So it's
that-
not even 6 months worth of data. Okay,
Yes.
right,
Oh,
so,
it's only 4 months?
you said it's through September?
No,
Uh,
it says it says year-to-date as of 1/25/26.
But, yes, but you said that there are some things that there's a lag
There's a
time in
lag. Oh,
Oh,
collecting.
yeah, there's
Yes.
a lag in your
That's what
sales
that's
taxes.
the point I'm trying to make, is that
Yeah.
Yeah.
even in the lag time of what you're collecting, the main difference that we're seeing is what Mr. Creasy just pointed out, is
Yeah.
we're seeing a snapshot in time
Of the
without
lag,
completion.
Of the lag.
Once we get that quarterly analysis, all these questions will fade into the distance.
Exactly.
So going forward to the expenditures, are there any questions?
Yeah,
Who
Yep.
wants to go first?
go ahead.
Okay, looking at page 3, I'm
Mhm.
just curious, transportation, we don't have anything budgeted for 25-26?
Yeah, so that 269,000 was related to the trolley purchase, so I don't believe that there's any plan for the current SB 125
I
grant.
think the bigger question is, transportation falls, I believe, within the city manager's department. I think that's where that money is pulled from. I think that's your question, right? But we do budget for transportation, but it is not
It
in its,
doesn't come out of this.
right, I think that's the question,
Yeah, that line item was specific for that transfer.
right? Because
If we're comparing,
that function exists within the city manager's department budget is,
So instead of
That's right.
transportation, it should say trolley purchase.
it could say something
Oh,
like
there
that,
you go,
sure.
right, okay, that
Mhm.
makes sense.
'Kay.
And then curious
Okay.
with
Yeah, that helps.
recreation, the big bump in the budget from, the 24-25 actuals at 365, and now we have 722 in the 25-26 budgeted. It's a pretty big increase.
yes, so I believe that that's related to a position for the manager that was not previously,
That's correct. We did create a recreation manager position that we moved in there. I think we also added an administrative position as well. So yeah, we increased staffing in that department.
If I might ask, it seems to me the questions that possibly we're asking right this moment would really be looking at budget adjustments to date, because these items that we see in the mid-year review would have been things that came up in the budget when we approved it. So when we're asking questions like why is this more than before, that was a question that came up in our budget review cycle when we approved the budget.
I would say in general, yes, Mayor, but there, as you may recall, we had a process when we were first looking at the budget where we identified several departments that had very large increases over
Fair enough.
the prior actual, and the request went out to try to vet those, but there were no changes made by virtue of that. So I think that question is still lingering, but you are correct from a process point of view. The budget process is the primary mechanism by which you decide whether that number is right or not.
For sure. To me, it's the next page is where you see these adjustments to the budget, where you would say, oh, I don't want to jump ahead. I'm saying that's where that conversation happens, is when we made decisions, we should be able to look at these things and remember when we enacted them, because it's recent history.
Yes, if everything was tickety-boo, that's exactly the way
Understood.
it should be. Yes, that's in the dictionary. We'll talk afterwards if you want.
So if we move on to attachment C, as the mayor said, this is the list of budget adjustments to date. This was the same listing that was provided at the last Finance and Budget Committee meeting, just to be updated for the activities since then. The total impact is $2 million. However, the items listed in blue are the ones that affect general fund. So of that 2 million, about half of that affects the general fund. The others are hitting special funds.
And did you see my comment about the double count on the secure all budget adjustment? I don't know if you had a chance to read that or not, but your 185,000 adjustment on October 14th, in fact, that was not enacted. So that one needs to come off this list. And in fact, the council sent it back for review, and it came back the next month in November at the 194.8. So you didn't actually get two bumps to that budget. You just got the latter one. And I'm certain of that because I've looked at the minutes and they didn't approve that item. So a minor issue, but it is almost 200,000, so it's worth
I
capturing.
had one little tiny question too, which is the November 18th OUSD grant match. Now, my understanding was we're matching the grant if they receive the grant. So we're just setting it, we're allocating it and setting it aside, but it's not money spent yet.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Cool. I hope it does get spent. Okay.
Well, I can say, being a renter of Matilaha, that place is pretty bloody expensive, so they better fix it up, because otherwise we might find another place to do the play in our backyard or something.
So when I look at the total request for all the funds, you pointed this out, I'm just clarifying again. This is the general, but also capital improvement. That's the total, all of the above. In other words-
Yes.
Yes, okay.
The 2 million is inclusive of all the funds. Of
Right.
that 2 million, 1 million affects the general fund.
Sorry, you said that probably, and I missed it. 1 million of the 2 is general fund.
Yes, so
Yeah.
everything highlighted in blue or font in blue
Yep,
is general fund related.
got it.
So the total at the bottom of the summary requests by
Oh,
fund.
sorry, it's right there below. I see it now. Thank you very much for that.
Yes.
And you just have to take 185,000 off of that 1,049,000 number to fix that one glitch.
Yeah, we'll look into that. Thank
Okay.
you.
No, understood, got it. Is there, let me see, then is a shorthand way of saying that the work that we've done so far in the council this year with additional things in the general fund, like help of Ojai, et cetera, have roughly been something on the order of $1 million?
No, because I think what we're saying is the hit to the general fund is that, but
That's all I
the
mean.
council direction has hit other funds as well.
I just meant to say in the general fund, sorry.
Yes.
I should have said that.
Yes.
Okay.
And I will add that these adjustments are reflected in that fund balance summary we saw on the previous discussion item.
So that's, could you link that to the fund balance?
Yes, so there's another attachment that's going to follow with the updated number.
Okay, all right.
Somebody's phone's going crazy.
Mine is off, so.
Okay.
Attachment D is a mid-year budget adjustment request. So these are not currently reflected in the numbers that we have been reviewing so far. These are additional appropriations being requested. So I'll just go through the list. The first one is,
And sorry, I'm just going to jump in. These will be requested when this comes before the city council on the 10th of
yes,
February, right?
Okay.
Oh, okay. 10th of
So these are just, staff is going to make this request. This doesn't mean, council has to review and approve that. Sorry.
and I apologize, some of the descriptions got cut off, so I will make sure I clarify those line items. So the first one is transient occupancy tax. The current budget is at 7.1 million. The request is a overall 500,000 regarding TOT, but with Measure C, we're splitting that out. So we will also be requesting the appropriate increase in Measure C as well. Going down to expenditures, in the city manager's department, request of $35,000 to cover recruitment expenses that were not previously budgeted. The finance department, $73,500 for the Kroll audit. Recreation, contracted specialty camps, requesting an additional $15,000 due to increased participation in the programs. We are requesting a new line item for senior programs. That's just to split it out from the other line items so that there's better record and tracking of the seniors. The Soul Park lease, $6,180 to reflect the land use agreement amount with the county. Public Works, another $15,000 for contract services related to compost and mulch. That's with the contractor Agromin. And in IT, there's a software budget currently $25,000 and a request for $40,000 related to new AI platforms as well as additional city email accounts. Another request in the IT department is $50,000 addition for contract services related to cybersecurity support. And the last item in that section is the city attorney's department. I did use the description of general consulting, but this is the overall budget for the city attorney department. So that was budgeted at $688 and an increase of $710. This includes not only the city attorneys, but other special legal counsel is also included in this department budget. And that is a total general fund request of $949,680. Okay, if I go below, the next section is special funds. So the three are related to our equipment fund. The first two line items, it's not a new appropriation, but just a request for transfer in the line item budget. And that is, no, I'm sorry. The first one is a new appropriation request for software for $35,000, and that is related to the document retention software. And then the following two, and I'm sorry I misspoke, is a transfer of appropriation that was already approved within the budget, just moving it from computers line item to tools and equipment that we track for PEG fees. So for special funds, that net request is $35,000. And then there is another, category of requests, and that is transfers. So the Capital Projects Fund is requesting a $50,000 transfer in from plaza maintenance. And then the second line item, plaza maintenance, can be thought of a revenue source. So it's a transfer in from, no, I'm sorry, I got it the other way. But we're matching the transfers, so they have to tie. So it's a $50,000 request on both ends. So transfer coming in $50,000, transfer going out of $50,000. So that net, results in a total transfer of $100,000. I'll just note that one line item can be thought of a revenue line item and the other one as an expense line item.
And could I ask a question about the capital project? Was that the, I know they renamed what that item was, but I know they had to redo the parking lot and they had to scrape it down. Is this that project? Does anybody know? What? No, it says plaza maintenance. The plaza maintenance amount was, I think she's.
I'm familiar with the project you're speaking of, but this is not reflecting that one particular project. That just, as the treasurer is pointing out, that just comes from the general capital improvement program.
Okay.
And that is born, largely from Measure C funding. But there was an item recently before the council where we were asking them to appropriate money to finish that effort. Your memory's correct.
Okay, all right. So this is a different one.
Could I just ask almost a clarifying question of just description? You say transfer in from plaza. Normally that would imply a good thing for the general fund expenses if we're getting money from somebody else. And yet the capital projects, current 250 growing to 300. So should that actually be transferred out to Plaza?
So these two funds is not related to the general fund. So although
Right, I believe this relates to the landscaping and lighting district. Am I getting that correct?
it's one of the district
Right.
assessments, yes.
Right. And so that's borne through assessments from the property owners within that particular geographic district.
So none of these numbers hit the general fund, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, so not in general fund, so then I'm not gonna worry about it that much.
I just have a question, it might be somewhat silly, but the $75,000 to Kroll, is there any way to recoup that expense depending on what happens? No.
We're not a party to any type of proceeding against that individual, so this is, yeah.
Okay, just thought I'd ask.
I think what's gonna come up in the council will be, it's under the general consulting, so the new city attorney transition, others, I realize that's not only the new attorney, but it's doubling the budget. So I could see that's gonna be a conversation.
So if we look at that, and this number is based upon what you spent the year before, so you were about 1.3 million. Council gave direction, hey, we're spending too much money on city attorney. We ratcheted it down in the budget. Shortly thereafter, we went out for bid.
I get it.
And then the discussion was, well, now you're gonna probably have some overlap, so that number is not going to be anywhere close to what you budgeted. And that's
get it.
exactly what we're seeing.
I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm saying I expect it to be brought up to say,
Sure.
well, is it making sense? Is it the right spend?
Right,
You
and
know, that kind of
so at this moment, you still are getting some invoices from your prior city attorney as well
Understood.
as your current city attorney as
Right.
things get wrapped up and transitioned over. And
Right.
you'll see that for a little bit longer.
No, I get that.
I would second your general thought, though, Mayor. I think this is going to beg for a lot more detail than it currently has. And it is true, you are still getting invoices from the prior firm, but they're very small, at least the ones that I've seen. So to go and recalling your notion that the budget, the logic that decided the budget at the time it was decided should be sort of our default go-to. You know, we thought about it carefully then, therefore, let's not second guess it now unless we have new facts. So what we're seeing is actually a number that will now eclipse last year's number. And last year's number was nearly 3 times the year before it. So we have established a new normal that is far from what we would like to see. And I'm not privy to the extensive litigation calendar that you all are living with. And, pacing of litigation, it can be cheap one month and then super expensive the next and so on.
It's
So,
really, yeah.
There's a lot of detail here, but I'm pretty sure you'll have a fair amount of public comment about why we're doubling the legal budget.
One thing, if I could just explain a little bit, one thing that Ojai does, and it's common in a lot of smaller cities, is we rely on the city attorney's office for a lot of additional bench strength. And they do a lot of work for us at times that helps us get day-to-day things across the goal line. We're not operating in a system where everybody has to go through me in order to get to the city attorney. I want my department heads to be able to consult with the city attorney if they have a legal question, and that's what we do. Similarly, we have all council members accessing them as well. We don't have any type of gatekeeping as far as council members going to the city attorney, and city attorneys, as everybody knows, I mean, it's basically a time-based billing that you're receiving. So that's reflected in what we have. Now, could we change that? Absolutely. But it would require some discipline, and we'd have to put some, some rules in place where, there are gates in order to access the city attorney's office.
The only thing I would say is, I'll accept your description at face value, that does not explain doubling the budget.
Just to say, I'm looking at
Then
the,
let me jump in one
Sure,
more,
go ahead.
because there's
Go
some other things in there too. This is not just the city attorney's office. This is every legal expense, of which there have been many.
Yeah.
Some, related to litigation, some related to TOT proceedings, So there are probably about 4 or 5 firms in total that we use, and that all adds up.
Just to say this, so when I look at the 25-26 recommended budget, that 688 is there. When I look at the 24-25 revised budget, it was $1,150,000, right? And then we had the year prior to that actual. So yes, it's true that if you go back actually many years, you'll see a lot happened around when land use changed and all that kind of stuff. So that was the prior council. But just to say, I do, Mr. Harvey, the way you said it was, I think all of us said, let's try to spend less money. But that was a hope. It wasn't reflecting a past spend, because the past spend on the past budget revised was $1,150,000.
Well, and sorry, I just don't mean to
Yeah.
belabor this, but as if you watched the last council meeting, there was a big discussion about, what I'm just gonna call the Becker development, the Mallory Way.
Uh-huh.
And that will require a significant amount of legal assistance. And so if council wants to change course, that's fine, but that will be a significant hit because it's a very complicated matter, and, there will be discussions, there will be multiple back and forth between the city council and that party, and that's gonna be expensive.
That year, 23, if for those of us who were in the audience or whatever saw, there was a lot of legal activity that year related to that. And we saw a step change in legal spend that year related to that project. So I don't want to say that we live in this environment now, but we're not out of it yet.
One other thing to keep in mind is the city does have a rule on the books that says if you're going to spend more than the budgeted amount, the city council, on a department level basis, not within line items within a department, but at a department total basis. If I'm going to go over my budget, the city council has to be informed in advance and approve that. It's a basic form of financial control. And the fact that the city budget, or the city attorney's actual spend last year was, round numbers, 200,000 more than their budget, means that at some point in time, they should have come to you and said, it's April, it's looking bad, we need an extra 200 grand. They didn't do that, and therefore, you have code enforcement, proactive people showing up. They could, have their first job be to have the city obey the code by when a department looks like it's going to go over, they need to, come to daddy and get approval. The other thing I'll say is that it is, to the extent there are discretionary uses of legal service, such as department heads having a question about X or Y or Z, we've all lived in situations in our lives where budget constraints have forced a level of discipline that wasn't necessarily natural, but is necessary. And it's good to have a gatekeeping discipline that requires people to jump through enough hoops that everybody knows, yeah, this is necessary, not just feels good.
I hear what you're saying. So two responses. The first is on the council side, we agreed we are not tasking the legal department with something that is only an interest. We want to say at least 2 council people are interested in them pursuing that. That was the first thing we agreed to for that purpose. But the second thing is, for me, it's not so much that legal overspent and now we have to pay for it. My perception would be we probably need to have more upfront, uncomfortable, difficult conversations about our situation than we are inclined to do. So that beforehand, we're making the conversations knowing that our legal spend is going to be up. So I don't think you disagree with that.
Yeah, and I would agree 100%. That upfront, uncomfortable conversation actually is one of the best value-added conversations you can have.
And we should be having those. We should know where we're at and what we're endeavoring to do. And also, even if we don't want to do it, we might have to do it. And that's okay.
Agreed.
Yep. Thank you for this. And that's coming February 10th, just to say again, correct? Okay.
Yes. And then attachment E is the fund balance summary, similar to the one that we saw on the previous item. The only change is the last row to add the effect of the additional requests. So instead of the 5.6, instead of the 21.8 million ending balance. With these mid-year request adjustments we just reviewed, it would be an ending balance of 21.2 million. So if we look at the unallocated amount, it will go from 5.6 to 5 million with the adjustments that we just reviewed on the previous attachment.
The increased revenue softened that amount.
Yes.
I see that.
Oh, so you did add both of the expenditure items, the ones coming up on June?
Yes,
Or
so,
the next?
And the revenue,
Is that
and the
right?
revenue piece as well.
Okay,
yes.
so that's the net?
Yes, so the
5009?
is the unallocated portion after the 100% reserve. Yes.
That's the word I was using, that's what I was looking for. Unallocated.
Good.
And I'll jump in with a comment, but obviously we can go around. I think the major comment I have on this is that I recall observing last year that we had kind of exited the period of time when our revenues were growing very strongly, and we were more into the, normal life inflation rate plus a little bit if you get lucky on revenues. And the expenditures, however, still had a big head of steam. And I sent you all PDF, which I'm sure you probably didn't have time to look at yet, but I suggest you should look at it when you get a moment, because this is the chart of revenues versus expenses over the last 4 years. And it is clearly the case, and I also have a chart going back several more years so you can see kind of the long-term trend. It reminds me of the joke about the guy who fell off the 10-story building, and as he passed the 5th-story window, he was heard to say, well, so far, so good. But we are entering a phase where the financial discipline is going to need to be closer to home, I think. And it is also the case, the TOT revenue stream is vital to us, clearly. Is vulnerable to blips in the economy or worse blips than that. So I think it is a sobering situation when I see that I'm now budgeting to quote-unquote lose money in the reserve after several years in a row of making good money. And so I think it's always good to plan for a need before that need slaps you in the face. The other thing I would say, just parenthetically, when you're going for the mid-year budget changes, I would look at that interest number as well, because you basically, as we sit here today, you've earned the entire year's interest budget already, and you could have $500,000 or $600,000 more coming in. But I'll let you manage that detail, but it's, there's nothing wrong with truing that up if you highly likely it's going to happen.
If I can respond to you, it seems to me, and this isn't binary, it's not either or, it's something in between these two things. In my view, and I'm going to use a kind of a shorthand phrase, the city needed to grow up in several important ways. For example, having somebody that has a dedicated HR function, that's just one point. But having an accounting department that's robust enough to do it. So to say that an increase in the expenses is only negative, in my opinion, it misses the point of saying, actually, we needed to develop and enhance our capability. Now, does that mean all of those spends are good? Of course not. So it's something like looking at each one of those saying, is this a value add that we can live with, and what's the value? How is it increasing the value? So what I'm hoping is that we're actually coming to a more standard normal where we need to be for what we're intending to offer. That's where I'm coming from. But
Well, I just want to add, you actually are on a revenue increase roll. You just brought online a new hotel that has been at very high occupancy, which we're only just now booking any type of revenue related to it. I would not be surprised if your net from the El Roblar each year is $1 million, because you don't just get TOT, you also get sales tax. And like the OVI, what we're seeing is there's a lot of interest in this, and the folks that are able to stay there, a lot of them are immune from some of the ups and downs in the economy. A cheap room at the El Roblar on a weekend is $750 a night, And that's a stay that you have to have a 2-night minimum, and they're not hurting for people showing up. So we're not, trying to spend like drunken sailors, of course. We budget very, very conservatively, but we're seeing situations, especially on the weekends, town's sold out. Town is sold out. Now, often in the middle of the week, no, of course not. But that's kind of, in January.
The reason why I offer the HR function, it seems to me though, is that you could have, hopefully, if everything goes well, you can avoid improper hires and the costs related to that by having a more robust recruiting system, right, and an assessment system. So that's where you do see an upfront cost that only looks like an increase in expense, but I hope that what we will see over time would be, if we have it the way I hope we do, a legal diminishment, if we can get there. But I would say it's not different than what you're saying. It's something in between that we should be looking rigorously and saying, are we adding value to these increased expenses? Of course.
Well, I would agree in general that there are many areas where spending more money, even though it may hurt your expense number, is actually a very smart thing to do. And I'll take the parochial view on the finance division. I'd love to have it fully at staff right now. Frankly, if we have a full-time accountant, we'll probably save more than that salary alone just by bringing down the consultant expense a little bit. And HR, good example as well. Lots of things. There are false economies abounding if you're not intelligent about it. The one thing that I do think, and by the way, I've been to the El Roble, not to stay, but to eat, and I agree, it's a jumping place. And, bless their hearts, it's improved the city. To the extent that we have sandbagged our revenue budget, because the revenue budget, even with these adjustments, is down from last year's actual. So what I'm hearing you say is, whoa, it's gonna be way up. And I can tell you, if you add in the interest, which I know you're gonna get, is gonna be up. So why do we present a overly conservative revenue budget relative to things that we know? That's, if the numbers are not accurate, then it's kind of hard to do any analysis, let alone insightful analysis.
Well, I could jump in a little bit, especially as it relates to the El Roblar. So we didn't, at the start of the fiscal year, that we did not have the confidence that they were actually going to be able to go live. So it was quite a surprise when they pulled off a real hat trick by addressing some pretty significant fixes and went live. We're just now starting to get the receipts in from TOT, the last receipts, I think we got, November, is that what we received? Right. So we still haven't received the holidays. So we're just trying to figure out what is the number we should expect from them. It's only been a few months, and we don't want to put something out there and have it be incorrect.
But you are at mid-year review, so now's the chance to update it. And if you were worried they weren't even gonna open, well, that worry is definitely not a problem anymore. So I think in my decades of doing budgets, it has never been the case that sandbagging either expenses or revenues came back to benefit me. It's always been a source of, well, how could you have not seen reality back when everybody else saw reality? So anyhow, but it's yours to manage.
Underreporting revenue, I hear what you're saying. It was conservative with some uncertainty, so we should get as close as we can get. Why wouldn't we? That makes sense.
And I'll just add for the interest income, the budget from 24-25 and 25-26 did increase. So in the current fiscal year, we did budget interest income at $500,000. I will also add that interest income is spread across the funds based on the an average cash balance. So it's not only the general fund that's receiving all the revenues, but yes, we did increase that budget to $500,000.
And just final comment on interest, since one of my pet projects, I think your total interest, when I add up all the funds, is around $680,000 of budgeted interest for the year. And if I take the year-to-date through 6 months, and I add in the LAIF interest for the second quarter, which will get allocated to the second quarter, you're at $600,000. So you've made already almost your entire year's interest. So, but again, don't want to waste everybody's time.
No,
on
I
it.
get, so yeah, I mean, we'll end the year well, which is fine.
I
but-
find interesting.
No, of course. I mean, it's really wonderful to get to the end of the year thinking everything's great, but it's really nice to know mid-year, we might have made different decisions had we known we would have fewer expenses and more revenue. Of course, that makes sense.
If I were a member of the public, not graced with all the intelligence that this group has, I would say, Jiminy Christmas, looks like you're gonna be losing 1.6 million this year, and you've just doubled the legal budget, and, you know, your revenues are down from last year. Why isn't this a 3-alarm fire? We don't want them to panic when they don't need to. So anyhow,
No, I get what you're
enough of
saying.
my soapbox.
I see. So are we good with number 2, moving on to number 3? Any more comments?
I did
Yeah.
have one thing.
Okay.
Because we're gonna leave the budget numbers there.
Mhm.
Okay, and I did.
Microphone, please.
Oh, yeah.
Microphone, please, sorry.
Yep.
So, speaking of pet projects, I do have a pet project also, which is trying to understand the GAN limits for the city. And the city's, when I see about $2 million in general fund expenditures above what we had originally budgeted, I get a little concerned. And so I went and did some research. I did actually a deep dive. I couldn't stop digging once I started. And so I have a handout. We don't have to discuss it. I'm not trying to add an agenda item. I have been in discussion with Mr. Harvey and staff, and it does sound like everything is good. There's no accusation or any misdeeds that's being brought up. It's just a point of reference for when you're doing mid-year adjustments, being able to look back at what your original appropriation, your appropriations were at the time you budgeted, and then mid-year when you have that substantial of an increase. I think personally, it's something that should be done every mid-year adjustment. That you go back, you look at what your GAN limit is, you look at where your capital assets are, and you look at that as something that you can balance out and say, oh, we're good, we're good. So this is just a handout. I don't
Okay.
mean to intend to add anything to the discussion other than that.
And you're in conversation now?
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you for that.
Does
Okay.
anybody want a handout?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, please. Do you have enough for everybody?
Yep.
Okay.
2, 3, I think I do. That's what I got.
Thanks. Oh, yes. There you go. Thanks for that. Okay, I will look this over. Okay, so let's move on to number 3, status update.
Yours at 4.
We just finished number 2, I believe.
I think it's right.
So did I say number 3, status
Yeah, I
update?
think 4.
Oh,
is where we're at.
isn't 4 future agenda items?
You're right, Mayor. So number 3 is status.
Status update, yeah, number 3.
Oh, so
That's okay.
according, just the flyer, the things
Th-
off
this is-
the
Oh.
tabs.
Oh,
Oh, just the
Because
tabs
there's
are
a
up there.
tab here that says 4 status.
Understood.
updates.
I'm just going off the
Okay.
front printed agenda part. Okay.
So I'll just be giving a brief presentation of the status update for the Finance Department. We will go over the Kroll and IDBA report and status, as well as status updates within the Finance Department and a little roadmap for where we see that we're going.
I printed out I don't have those slides. I didn't bring that.
They're
I-
in the agenda, so they were attached, like if you look at the agenda items, they were part of the PDF.
I know. I didn't print it out.
Oh, I see.
I can give you mine.
Does anybody have a copy?
Yeah, we're
I don't
bringing you- we're
waste my
bringing you one.
printer ink on
We're
red,
bringing you one right now.
backgrounds, just so you know. Do try to conserve a little bit on my backgrounds, and I can't really see those. Thank you.
Or conserve all the way and bring it on your computer.
Yeah, well, that'll be next.
Okay.
So, as you know, Kroll was engaged by the city's outside legal counsel, I guess now former, after the former Assistant City Manager Carl Alameda's termination. And the investigation was structured to determine if there was any financial misconduct or impropriety during his tenure here. With the Kroll report, their research included targeting reviews of vendors, employees, as well as interviews, along with searches of Alameda's office and city email communications. And the copy of the report, as you know, can be found on the city's website. This was presented at the December 9th meeting at City Council. And just to contrast with Eid Bailey was engaged by the city to perform an independent assessment of the finance department. They looked at areas such as staff size, organized structure, abilities, as well as accounting, reporting, budgeting, and forecasting practices, as well as policies and procedures and the internal controls of the department. And their report and findings can also be found on the city's finance department website. Though there are overlapping findings or areas identified between the two reports, I will note that they were engaged for two separate scopes and performances, though there were overlapping comments made. And with the Kroll report status update, Ms. Billings has been working with city departments to work on those list of findings and areas of weaknesses, and a quarterly update will be provided to City Council the first quarter this year. So that is coming soon.
We're eager to see it. Are we eager to hear it?
And an update with Eid Bailey. Eid Bailey has been very helpful with the implementation of the current ERP. We use Springbrook Enterprise. Enterprise will be soon phased out, so they help the city implement to a new cloud-based version, Cirrus. Cirrus is now live and has different modules within Springbrook. So some of the modules that we currently use are listed, such as AP, AR, bank reconciliation, cash receipts, general ledger, payroll, permitting purchase orders. Purchase orders is on in progress. So we went through the test phase with the departments. Unfortunately, when we went to the live phase, we ran into some hiccups where the workflow was not flowing properly. With Springbrook and Eid Bailey, who has been helping us get this back on track, the latest update was that Springbrook had completed an audit of the access levels. And so now staff, specifically, we're working with Public Works to make sure that now that is flowing properly. One of the issues was when a purchase order was created and submitted and routed to approval, the approver was not able to see what the information that was flowing through. So that was one of the main obstacles that we are currently working on. But we don't unfortunately have a timeline specific. If we run into situations again, we'll have to reach out to Springbrook. But we do have a contact with the support manager there. Another software implementation that will be coming forward is the electronic timesheets, ESS. That will be available later this year in April. We are waiting for the new version to roll out. So currently, Springbrook would not offer us the old version because they know that will be phased out. So we are just in the waiting period for that to be up and running.
Before you move on, I'm sorry. I just want to go back, and the way it was worded in this document, this says Springbrook currently has 13 modules, but I didn't see that you are actually using all those, or some of them, or most of them. I couldn't tell which ones you were using, which ones you're not using. Is there any?
The ones listed are the ones that we currently use. Except for the purchase order module that is in progress to be implemented.
Okay, so the city has currently implemented all those 13 modules.
Not the 13 that are all available, the ones that are listed as examples. So for example, AP, we do have that module. That's what we use to pay invoices, pay our contractors. So the ones listed are currently in use. with
Oh,
the
I see,
exception
of the
purchase order.
13.
9 of the
I'm sorry, I didn't count them up, okay.
No worries.
So of the 9 that they have available, you're currently, of the 13, you're using 9. Okay, got it. And these are the ones you're using?
These are the ones that are in use, but I will say that, part of our next steps is to streamline and improve processes within each module. There is work to be done so that we're more efficient and productive with the workflow that we currently have in place.
Uh-huh.
For example, I'll take bank reconciliations. That module, helps us clear checks for that activity, but the bank reconciliation is still a heavily manual process. So just to say that though those are in use, there are room for improvements in the process within those.
So did I also hear you say that you have rolled this out with Public Works, and Public Works is entering or doing some of the,
When I mentioned Public Works, that was for the purchase order module, so we're testing with that department to make sure that the workflow is working properly.
oh, great, okay. And they previously didn't have that ability?
Correct.
Okay.
Not just Public Works, but citywide, so.
Oh, it is going to go citywide, okay.
Right.
Also, the gap was citywide, is what you're saying.
So the gap was citywide. It was
Yeah.
a big gap.
It's a big gap,
Sorry.
yeah.
I just wanted to acknowledge that
No, it's
because
good.
I think that's a significant change. And then in terms of comparisons to, so you're not currently using the budget. Do they have a budget module that you're not using? I'm wondering,
So that would fall under the general ledger. So budget functions, for example, doing adjustments, creating the budget is within the general ledger module.
okay, all right, that's what I wanted. So you are using their budgeting with your general ledger data. And is that information available to the departments? Do they know? Can they look at their budget online and see where they're at?
Yes. So each department has somebody who has access to the system, who's familiar with it. So at any moment, they're going to know how much remaining spend they have in a particular account from what was allocated in the adopted budget by the city council. So these conversations, so that's why, if anyone comes into my office with a request to spend something, it's always a very simple conversation. Well, where are you pulling it from?
Yeah.
Okay, is that logical for that particular account? Do you have money available for that? And will you be in a position where you still have money for the remainder of the year?
And that's a big learning curve for people to know, to jump into, from my point of view. Typically, from a staff point of view, doing stuff online versus not having it
Oh,
online.
they're pretty well, this is pretty standard.
I mean, they've done it online in the past.
Yeah, we have somebody in each department who is very well versed with Springbrook and knowing where to look and understanding where each particular department or office sits as far as how much they've spent and how much remains.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, good.
Part of the Eid Bailey list that we have accomplished, just to note a few, has been positive pay. So that means that whenever we cut a check, we upload a file to the bank to confirm the name of the person we're paying and the amount to reduce any fraudulent activity of checks being modified. So that has been implemented fully. Additionally, the reporting for 457 reporting requirements have been corrected. We now report biweekly as opposed to monthly. And another note for bank reconciliations, for example, they used to be outsourced, but we will be preparing them in-house. And some of the in progress are the policy procedures and updates that are still in review, being drafted. And another part of the year end for fiscal year 24-25 is not only getting the unaudited actuals and going through the audit, there's also the CFA, which is the Schedule of Federal Expenditures. So by law, if we expend more than $750,000 in a fiscal year, we will have to do a single audit. So we're still going through that process as well. Eid Bailey is very instrumental in helping us get back on track. So they have been working mostly with the 24-25. You know, it's difficult because we're also in 25-26. So they're helping us get caught up to proceed going forward in the new year. So in the next slide is just the current status. Just to recap, the PO module is in the test phase. We're hoping that all the kinks in the system are resolved. And the ESS module, pending new version in April. We currently still have a vacancy in our department, and that's the accountant position. We're hoping to strategize and go out for recruitment. I know in the next council meeting, there's also going to be an item discussing the accountant position. As mentioned, the 24-25 year-end audit, that fieldwork will begin in about 2 weeks. Concurrently, we have another audit for TDA, the Transportation Development Funding, is a separate audit, as well as preparation for the 24-25 annual comprehensive financial report. Those are the current items that we're focusing on aside from the day-to-day. Next steps, I'll just reiterate, you know, with the PO module, we're hoping to get that resolved in live. We're still testing with Public Works, and then once we get that flow, it will be rolled out citywide. Yes.
Just not to interrupt, but like with that implementation, like a ballpark figure of how long you think till it's up and running throughout?
When I first got here, initially we were hoping by January of the new calendar year. I want to say by the new fiscal year, we'll have all these new softwares implemented so that we can start the year fresh with all these new upgrades. Unfortunately, I don't have a specific timeline because we're also working with Springbrook, but at the mercy of their timeline as well. But we do have a contact with the support manager there, and I believe that she's been fairly responsive. So the last time they met, I believe, was last Friday. So there is communication between Springbrook and the city.
What I used to say in my work, a situation like this, I'd say our schedule or our completion date is still January. We're just not sure which January.
But I'm hearing you say it would be wonderful to start when we come into our next budget cycle that we are up to speed on all of our software. That is the intent.
Yes, that would
Okay.
be
I get it.
ideal.
I
yes.
get it.
Other steps that we will work towards is updating our chart of accounts, streamlining processes. As I mentioned before, there is room where we can always grow and improve and make it more efficient so that we do meet the timelines that we set forward in our policies, as well as training staff, whether that be citywide and also within the finance department. Just to note, for example, with the PO modules, those were recorded. So we will get those videos so that we have them on hand for training purposes internally as well.
Well, I know that we're going to have at the end of our first quarter, we'll have an update on the accounting department. So the more that we hear about these updates, I think it makes the entire public feel really good about what's happening. We're more confident. So the more the better. Yeah, the more we hear.
Another thing I used to say was, I'm too busy having highlights to tell you about them. So, but having said that, I do agree, Mayor.
No, not highlights, but here's another analogy is that you're changing the engine out of the 747 while it's in flight. I totally get that. A change initiative in the midst of it is very difficult. So it isn't, we're not lost on that fact. You're also keeping a city going while you're upgrading. That's clear.
Yes, and I guess to that point, also next steps for our finance department would be closing out 25-26 in a few months. I know we're just closing 24-25, so that will be coming up, as well as the audit for fiscal year 25-26. And then we also will be going into budgeting fairly soon for the 26-27 year.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot happening, different timelines at once, but we're hoping by the future, which is there we go, fiscal year 27-28, the department goal is to be fully staffed, work on trainings, have less reliance on consultants. So 27-28 is the year that will be the year of normalcy.
To that point, I'm hoping that we have these large goals, of course, but it is an election year, we all get that. But if those goals were to generally retain, we could do much work on the budget before, the end of our fiscal year, so that the next fiscal year, you're not making so many adjustments. I know that's something that we're really intending to do. We are intending it, just the same way you're intending it.
Yes.
Okay.
Could I jump
Yes,
in
go
with just
ahead,
a
please.
few comments? And this is sort of at a high level, and it is meant to be helpful because we're all on the same page trying to get the finance function to be tickety-boo, as I say. They've been run like a well-oiled machine and absolutely not the source of anything other than just information and good feelings. I think in the past, recent past, we've had moving targets with regard to assessments of how long it's going to take for things to happen, how much they will cost, who will do it, and so on. So one of the things I think is really important is to find a way to have the discipline and the macro oversight, say, here's how big the problem is, or how big the objective is, and a realistic assessment of what it's going to take to accomplish that. I think married to the hip of that notion is detailed reporting with regard to timelines and activities. A lot of the updates we've gotten have been very, what I'll call anecdotal. Well, we're just about to roll out POs, or we're in testing phase for this. If you were reporting to the CFO, if we had a CFO, and you were reporting your overall status of the financial improvement project, if that's what we want to call it, you'd have a lot of very specific line items, task X, task Y, task Z, with very specific dates. It would feel like more detail than a city council might want, or a general public might want. But it is the antidote to angst over a lack of firm notion of project scope and project cost. So I think overkilling the audience with detail is a really good idea. The day will undoubtedly come when they say, Brenda, please, enough. We don't want to hear about your weekly deadlines anymore. But right now, that's a good way to keep them feeling better. The other thing is, unlike many organizations, most in fact, municipalities typically don't have an independent internal audit function. What that creates, unfortunately, is a single point of failure with regard to, is something getting done? And we all hope that we're honorable people and we won't be propagators of these single points of failure. But somebody knew that we weren't doing bank recs way back when, and they didn't say anything, and that was a single point of failure. So I think somehow you would be, apropos to the mayor's notion about you spend money to improve the organization, either you can maybe hire somebody on the outside to be an independent auditor to test various things. And I'm not talking about your auditor for the financial statements. I'm talking about a process auditor, somebody who doesn't have any skin in the game with regard to he installed the system or he's going to get a contract to upgrade it, anything. He just audits whether you're doing what you're supposed to do. And I think, I've talked in the past, maybe that person even reports to somebody other than the city manager. Could report to the city treasurer, for example. That would work. But something that gives the public confidence that there's an independent evaluation. And then finally, I beat this horse many times, but the municipal code does require bidding for contracts in excess of $30,000. It doesn't say price is the only driver, but it does say you're supposed to bid those. And we've taken Eide Bailey from a one-off to a very continuous thing. And now that we're looking at, hopefully 2 years down the road being free of that, there's a lot that's going to be spent between now and that point. And I think there's very little downside associated with bidding it out and a lot of upside, one of which is it's discipline for Eide Bailey. The last two contracts, both came in over the not to exceed maximum. And if my job is to install financial controls and I bill you for an amount more than the contract maximum cannot exceed, what does that say about me? I can't even impose controls on myself, let alone on the system overall. So those 4 general items, I would definitely look at bidding, and you could easily wind up with Eid Bailey still, but you might wind up with Eid Bailey at a slightly improved rate. Who knows? But anyhow, those are my all comments. I am thrilled that you're here. I'm thrilled with your attitude. I'm in general happy with the health of the city with regard to its intent, and I just want to make sure that that intent winds up being manifest in the actual results.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
That's good.
If I could just comment on some of those comments. We definitely want to provide more detail. However, this is why this presentation was provided to you. You can see that we're really trying to catch up. So we'll do our best to provide more detail while we're trying to do the work, because we do have a CFO. Her name is Brenda. It's our finance director, and she is a working director. So she doesn't just get to point fingers and say, you go do this, you go do that. She's actually rolled up sleeves and doing the work herself. So that's very important to understand. We are different than the private sector. We have not just one external audit. We have multiple external audits based upon the types of funding that we use. So it's not just, it's federal funds that are audited, it's county funds that are audited, not to mention every other Tuesday is an audit in front of the public. Everything we do is public. Everything is discoverable. We don't have any private documents. So there is an ongoing, always audit that is happening. Certainly you could appoint another additional auditor, but I'm just saying that we operate under many, many, many different masters. And Eid Bailey really was that roadmap telling us what we needed to course correct. The Ojai Municipal Code actually has an exclusion for professional services. You're not required to bid them out, and that's for good reason, because we have people here, Brenda and Leah, Christy, myself included, years of experience working with lots of different contract firms, and we know from our experience which ones are the good ones, which ones are the bad ones, which ones are the ones that are mostly best suited to do a particular task. Now, with that said, even though it's not required that you go out for a professional services bid, we often do. We don't always, but we often do. It does introduce a time delay whenever you have an RFP process. So sometimes it's not advantageous to the city to do that. I appreciate this committee. This committee can serve as that also additional audit function. We're going into the future agenda item section, and this is your time to come up with recommendations that you'd like to bring back to the council. Thank you.
I just want to reflect something that you said, Mr. Creasy, which is just this. I've had to report to my CEO about items where they were underreported in the past or not reported to their satisfaction. And over the period of a few months, when I gave them everything I could think of, then they said, I'm satisfied, you got it. And then I was able to report less. So it does seem like if we reasonably and also within our limits, if we can be offering more to the public as time goes forward, that's in our interest. I clearly think that. Yeah, cool. So,
I have one,
yeah,
I
go,
just have
please.
one comment.
Go ahead.
I appreciate having this extra time in this meeting. This is really the first time we've really had time in a meeting to be able to talk. And I think you did a beautiful job, Brenda, of presenting and explaining and putting all of that together. So I want to say I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
The other thing that I think might be helpful is to close the loop on the Eid Bailey recommendations on the policies. There were several policy recommendations that they had, and I'm sorry, I started to make a list of it, and I didn't bring the presentation that I had that says all the great things that this policy would do, that policy, that, and we don't have any of those. And I'm just putting that down there, down the road. I think that they know and can be helpful, and it would be nice to maybe prioritize. I think we talked about fixed assets, I think we talked about, even though you don't have debt, understanding debt and debt limitation and debt processing and what the requirements for those kinds of things are. I think getting us educated on what the opportunities are for those financial policies might be helpful. That's all. Thank you.
I thought some of the roadmap actually included some of those pieces when they highlighted, what was yellow and what was
Yeah.
in the green. So it is here in
It is
part.
here. We just don't have a priority list of which ones are headed to, maybe we should work on this one first, second, and third, and,
Okay. After the initial ones. I see what you're saying.
yeah.
Got it.
One thing, I echo my happiness with the expanded time for this meeting. I think we're adding value by understanding things better. With regard to the comment I made about an external audit, there is a process that is colloquially known as Sarbanes-Oxley, where you have a regular periodic affirmation that key controls are being done. So an example would be, let's say I'm the person who has to do the bank reconciliation. I would be required to sign a piece of paper on a quarterly basis that says, I did the last 3 monthly bank recs. Now, the fact that I'm required to sign doesn't mean I did it, but it increases the chances that I'm reminded I should do it. And in fact, I'd have to be pretty dumb to lie about that. The way Sarbanes-Oxley works in general is first you ask yourself organizationally, what are the key controls that if I know all these things are happening, then I'm pretty sure we're not going to get blown out of the water. Then you create a process whereby, let's say you've got 50 key controls. Then they get some sort of grouped into a half a dozen, local key control sets. And then supervisors or department managers or whatever would be in charge of saying, yes, the 5 in my department got signed off on, so I'm signing off that all these things happen. And then you report it up to the chief financial officer, and that person tells the city council, last quarter, all our key controls got signed off on. It is a terrific way to create assurance with the, continuing discipline. And at 2 organizations I used to work for, one we sustained it, the other we installed it, and it really is Sarbanes-Oxley gets a lot of bad press out in public company land because they think of it as expense, but accountants love it because it means you sleep at night. You know all the guys that were supposed to do things that you only get to see at certain level actually getting done. So something like that could also be a way to create the ongoing assurance that you're not going to get a 3 SD annual report again or something like that.
Thank you. So I'm going on number 4 now, the future agenda items, and I see that our next meeting for May 19th focused on the 26-27 budget review. We had listed a couple of future agenda items for after that. One was some kind of proportion recommendation for Measure C. I did note that. There was one more though, at least. I don't know if anybody noted that. One was Measure C.
Well, I certainly think a system update would be logical.
System update would be good.
And if we're talking about getting to some sort of quarterly pacing of that update for the city council, maybe we could be the guinea pig for that.
Okay.
Did you say that the proposed Measure C policy?
Mm-hmm.
Fine-tuning that?
That's one.
And I would like to add a GAN,
Okay.
limit evaluation checkup,
Good.
as part of the
Perfect.
the process, so that people understand more about what that is about.
Got it.
Oh, and then the reserve policy review.
Yep.
That's-
That was the other one I think.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, right,
No, that's good. That's good. Thanks. We got a lot to talk about.
right?
And you thought we didn't have anything to do.
Oh, no, we got plenty to do. It's more like what makes sense to do.
And thank you guys.
Yes, thanks a lot.
For your time, your effort.
Very much
It's
so.
truly appreciated, even though you probably feel like, oh my gosh, it's them again.
Well, it's work. Right.
Finally, having this over, huh?
Anything else? All right, meeting adjourned. Thanks.